We're back. Season 7, Episode 24, Uncommon Bond. This is the episode in which it's just kind of a guest star palooza because we have Sunburst come back to visit Starlight, and we interact with Maud and Trixie. And, oh my gosh, it turns out that Sunburst and Starlight have nothing in common! Clearly they're not actually friends. That episode. Now, clearly this episode sucks. What I want to determine is if this is green or blue. I suppose we'll determine as we go throughout the course of this review. I don't like to call these reviews, because they're not really reviews, at least not in my mind, even though we do give the episodes a rating towards the end of the episode. I'm sorry, I always get weirded out because people call my ruminations reviews, and they're super not. Like, that is absolutely not my mentality at all when it comes to ruminations. But most people call them reviews. A good sign of nervousness alongside excitement when you're just kind of babbling to someone, to anybody, really, who will listen, because you're really worried about someone, right? And you're really nervous about seeing someone, especially for the first time in a while. Boy, I've been there. Usually with girlfriends, not actually with friends, but still, you know, there have been plenty of times where I've been like... And it's usually just a non-issue, which is exactly what happened in this episode, so I'm guessing that the people who wrote this episode have been through that before. Who wrote this one? I wrote this down. Who wrote you? Identify your smelf. Oh, that's right, Josh Haber and Kevin Lepin, who hasn't had a great track record, but we'll get to the actual rating in a minute. He mentions bringing a lot of books along, and the episode does something which irritates me so much, I'm actually going to give it a counter-continuity point. I'll cover that in a moment, though. Because he's got all these books, right? Some of you may or may not know that I read fast. Now, I actually read faster now than I used to because I get practice in it all the time, because I have to read stream while playing a game at the same time, while analyzing it at the same time, and keeping the reviews in my head. So I have to read really, really quickly. But I've always been a quick reader, pretty much ever since I was a child. So when I used to fly on the plane, which used to be a very regular thing for me, like multiple times a year, I used to have a backpack that was absolutely crammed full of like Calvin and Hobbes collection books, you know, the really big ones. Because that would be what I would go through. And I had to have multiple of them because obviously I read very quickly. And what used to piss me off is I used to have the problem where I'd read all of them on the one plane ride, and then I'd have the plane ride back and nothing to read. So I got into the habit of carrying twice that many, but only having half of them in the backpack. And then the other half are in the suitcase, and then I just swap them. And I probably put way too much thought into this. Even as a kid, but this is the kind of person I am, so what can I say? It just, the whole thing, it reminded me of it as we were going through it, as he's like, I brought some books for the train. Yep. So, the episode does something that MLP does a lot, where it kind of briefly brushes past something that could by itself be an entire topic, and then immediately moves on from it. And that would be, oh, you know I like antiquing. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, how many of you have encountered a situation where there's something about yourself that you hold to be so true as to be commonly known, but when you mention it to a friend or a family member or someone who you think should know that, their response is, huh? And I'll raise my hand on this one. Yeah, I've actually had that happen to me relatively often. I've gotten better about it as I get older, if I'm being honest, because nowadays I keep much better track of who is part of which information spheres, because of course I have that all organized. Why wouldn't you? But, yeah, that used to happen to me all the time. Yeah, of course you know I'm into Mega Man. What's Mega Man? What? I'm an organized person. What do you want from me? I stream for a living. I have to be. You know how many spreadsheets I keep? More than a few. So, Twilight's like, hey, you're here. All right, so I mentioned the flaw, right? I got to mention the flaw because I'm giving a counter-continuity counter for it. Starlight has trouble lifting the bag full of books. I know it's for a gag. In fact, I know it's for a reference, too. But no. And I was actually debating in my head whether or not I was going to count that as a counter-continuity counter. Until the very same episode that we are watching made the opposite point later on. Later on in the episode, there's a bit where... No, that gets a counter-continuity. And hear me out, S.A. Ross. I'm going to give evidence. Later on in the episode gets it exactly right. It shows the difference and variance in magical aptitude and power between Sunburst and Starlight. Now, this is a recurring thing. We know Sunburst is pretty weak, and we know Starlight is very powerful. But it establishes this brilliantly, visually, and without ever actually saying it outright, by the chains. Trixie's in the chains, and Sunburst can't even pull the whole chain, so he just grabs one little chunk of the chain and pulls on the one chunk trying to find the thing. Starlight lifts the entire thing up into the air after rolling her eyes, separates the two with a teleport, and then puts them back down. That woman would not have problem raising that suitcase. So... no, that absolutely gets a counter-continuity counter. Gag or no. Maybe if it was the entire bundle, like the giant pile of suitcases in the back. Although, frankly, even that probably wouldn't work. Who knows? Moving on. Yeah, I wasn't even going to count the fact that she lifts stuff at the end of the thing. Yeah, Sunburst has a rarity pile. That actually amused me. Which is doubly funny, because if you think about it, he goes home with more stuff than he leaves with. Which is another problem I can relate to, actually, but that's because most of the time I was flying to meet family, and family gives gifts. So I started... you have to organize your suitcase to a lot for an unknown amount of gifts that you're going to receive. I mean, come on. Anyways. Moving on. So, I had to give the counter-continuity counter because that is a flaw. That is a flaw in the episode, and it needs to be acknowledged, especially when they do the exact right thing so much better later on in the episode. I mean, we even see the fact that Boulder got a twin. You caught that, right? At the mirror pool. Anyways. So, Starlight shows up. Yay! Second flaw of the episode. Hear me out. I know. You hate me. It's cool. I mean, it's not cool. It sucks. But I do have to point out flaws even in something I love. Sunburst earlier in the episode says that Ponyville is the antiquing capital. Like, it's antiquing central, I believe is how he phrases it. But Twilight shows up and says it'll be nice to interact with someone, because usually she's the only one at the antiquing shop. Now, in the interests of fairness, this is something that could be explained. Because all we have to assume is that Twilight, by herself, justifies the entire antiquing industry in Ponyville. And yeah, I talk about hoops, how many hoops you have to jump through to make something make sense. That's not that many hoops, really, to explain that away. So, I'm not giving that a counter-continuity counter, but it is still a flaw, and it is still something that's just kind of eyebrow-raising. I think that's it for flaws in the episode. I think we're up to 2, yeah. No, there is actually a third. And I know this because I can only point out 3 flaws. This is probably going to be purple, by the way. So, they notice that there's this map. It's made by the Helm, which we've discussed previously, and it's continuity. So, continuity counter for that. Really quick. Just jot that down before I forget. Continuity counter for the Helm, the mighty Helm. And I'm probably a little bit of a geek. In fact, I am a little bit of a cartography geek because I'm super into maps, and I've never really developed that particular aspect of my geekdom because I've literally never known anyone in my entire life who has been into cartography like I have been. Like, most things, I usually find something I can share the enthusiasm with, but nobody's into cartography. The idea of a bunch of Earth ponies in a setting like this making an accurate map is actually kind of cool. In my opinion. Because they have to be like, alright, hang on. And they would have to use math. They would have to use geometry and measurements in order to get everything out. And unlike a magic pony, which could just be like, bzz, bzz, or a Pegasi, who could just go up and sketch it out, right? There's just something kind of cool about that. So the point of the episode is made pretty much immediately. That's also true, Sovico. Hang on, I'm going to get to that. Just say it's literally my next line, Ross. I don't want to skip ahead because there's a lot to actually unpack in this episode. The point of the episode is made immediately apparent. Your friends get along better than you do, right? You don't share points of interest. Something we talk about a huge amount on this show, and frankly in real life, is shared enthusiasm, right? How many of you have something you're interested in that you have gotten to share that enthusiasm with someone else who is mutually enthused by it, and that's awesome? I imagine it's a not insignificant amount of you. That's a really stupid way of saying that I think it's all of you. Shared enthusiasm. Eking out, right? Oh, World War II tanks. Oh god, I can't think of it. Is it the T-32? I can't think of the specific tank, but it's totally the best World War II tank, I'm just saying. Don't even tell me about the Tiger. It's totally the I think it's the T-32. It's T-32 or the T-34. It's the T-34. I was getting the number wrong because I know what the T-32 is, and that's not that. That's a different thing, right? Like it's awesome to enthuse, and thus it is so easy to feel the opposite. So this is a little bit. I'll give you that, Jared. This is a little bit of a less likely thing, but it's still possible. How many of you have been something you're really into, and you've tried to share that with someone else, and they've just stonewalled you completely? Maybe politely, maybe rudely. I've experienced both myself. I've had my own mother told me that she was bored to tears listening to me talk about something I was really gushing about. That hurt. There's no joke here. That sucked to go through that. And so the episode, once again, is so wonderfully relatable. Just because what we're seeing here is someone who is trying to share enthusiasm with her friend and failing at it because he's sharing enthusiasm with others about things she's clearly not into. Now, this is when we talk about what Ross pointed out here. Yeah, exactly, Ross. You know, the idea of... I got lucky on that one, Slim Germaborn, because, you know, both my parents were into Trek, and so they took me to conventions, so I got part of the Star Trek scene really young, like when I was 5. But I do know what you mean, because there's plenty of things that I never got to share enthusiasm with until I entered the internet age. So, he's not an idiot. Sunburst says pretty early on, you don't have to pretend. Hey, honesty! That feels like the last episode. You don't have to pretend. I get that you're not into this. Starlight then says, no, it's fine. If you like it, I like it. Or I think what she actually says is, I like it because you like it. Now that's a lie. That's a valid opinion. There's actually such a thing as liking that someone else likes something. I have experienced that one, both myself and from other people as well. The catch is, she's not. That's why it's just a straight-up lie. She does not enjoy the fact that he enjoys, something that she doesn't enjoy, right? She is clearly and demonstrably just like this entire time, and it bothers her more and more and more. And yeah, you can already see the anxiety. I don't want to use that word. I feel like the word's overused. You can see the uncertainty gears turning in her head. So, this then leads to them gushing about the worrying, exactly. This leads to them gushing about all this stuff. Quick side note, we had to discuss this because it actually came up. There's a difference between loot boxes and random grab bags. How many of you have ever bought a random grab bag in your life? I have. There's actually quite a few subscription services you can do where you get like a bundle of Japanese candy, for example, or a thing of meat. There's meat boxes, there's bacon boxes, there's cheese boxes. Sometimes when you go to conventions, there's like just a grab bag of whatever. Yeah, exactly. I'm only mentioning this for the sake of completion, for the sake of being informative and being clear about my communication. Because what a loot box is not what this is, even though at the surface level they seem similar. When you go buy a grab bag, which is what I usually hear that referred to as far back as like the 90s, you're getting a random bundle of things you want. The whole point is to get a random selection of things, and maybe you'll get something cool, but that's not the goal, right? You're just trying to get a random thing of, oh, this is good, and this is good, and so forth and so on. A loot box is gambling, and has predatory practices layered on top of it, we've discussed many times, that is designed to try and get you to buy more and more and more and more loot boxes. Whereas with a grab bag, you buy the one. Maybe two. Or yeah, Loot Crate. That's the name of a company, if I'm not mistaken, that started doing that. Loot Crate, another good example of that kind of thing. Yeah, get a random t-shirt. One place, I don't know why I'm saying that. At Gen Con, there was a stall that was doing grab bags of wigs. Just get a random wig, right? And, I mean, yeah, you just get a couple random wigs, and it's cool. I didn't grab one. I wanted a specific wig, but still. I still have that wig, actually. It's right there. Anyways, I just wanted to comment on that, because the idea of just grabbing a random box, or in this case, barrel of stuff, is something that I've been doing since the 90s. My mother and I used to go to bookstores and buy a box of books. And it was just books that they put in that they didn't feel like sorting, pretty much exactly like he describes. So it's an old practice. I agree, Trihexia, but that brings us to our next point. Twilight and Sunburst are both totally geeking out about this. And, we're going to be pen pals because we're going to be pen pals with these antique stuff. Then they say, and I'm going to butcher this, Flight Vosten Flight. Excuse me, Flight Vosten Flight. Thank you. Now, I butchered that pronunciation. That is actually real-life language. It does, in fact, refer to a phrase that exists in real life, which in English translates as fortune favors the bold, which you've probably heard before. They give the version of reward prefers risk, but it is actually pretty accurate, and I just thought that was kind of cool that they did that, because as usual, this show tends to do its research when it comes to introducing ideas, so positive on that front. I mean, that's the goal, Slim Jim Reborn. Yeah, I know, it's weird, Ross, they thought about it. So we also see how the writing is once again nailing the idea that people are picking up on it. Twilight does something that's not actually all that subtle, but is just nuanced enough that I love it, because it shows that Twilight is an actual freaking character. Twilight has picked up on, through her enthusiasm, the fact that Starlight's not getting into this. And so rather than calling attention to it or being like, hey, Starlight, you okay? What Twilight says is, let's go through that later. We've got other stuff we can do. We can just deal with that later. She doesn't say we have to not do the thing we want to do. She doesn't try to call attention to the fact that Starlight's obviously feeling put out. She just quietly brings Starlight into the forefront of the social dynamic going on. Yeah, and so yeah, if you're paying attention, both Sunburst and Twilight have picked up on it and responded reasonably appropriately. This then leads to the board game. How many of you have played Fireball Island? I'll go ahead and raise my hand on that one. So, for those of you who haven't, it's Dragon Pit. The board game they play is basically Fireball Island. Like, there's some distinction, obviously, because legality, but that's clearly what it's based off of. I wonder if Hasbro actually owns Fireball Island. It's one of those board games that's reasonably fun, mostly because of the gimmick. I used to play it with a friend back in, that would have been 4th grade? 4th or 5th. One of the two, because I was at the same school for both. Anyways. So then there's this bit, and yeah, Mousetrap, that's another good example of that type of thing. Is it Milton Bradley? Are they under the Hasbro umbrella? Because the Hasbro umbrella is huge nowadays. Now, I'm going to go and explain something, and I'm going to get everyone to hate me for it. But that's okay, because that's my job, being honest. Like I said, I'm not a good liar. Starlight comes in and says, you having fun? In a wonderfully nervous tone. I didn't look up her name, But once again, the actress who plays Starlight is phenomenal. Like, she's challenging Tabitha St. Germain for my favorite actress on this show. There, you can just hear the... It's like 3 or 4 emotions all at once. There's the uncertainty, there's the worry, there's the excitement, like you're having fun, right? Like the need for the validation of that, plus the desire for your friend to have fun, plus the hope that you are bringing fun to your friend. And it's this wonderful tone that she nails for how she says that. His response is then, of course I'm having fun. First I went antiquing, and then I got to meet Twilight. Oh. But again, she does it more subtly than that because she's a much better actress than I am. The hesitance, the uncertainty, the worry, the fear. This is why Starlight is among my favorite characters on this show, pretty much in a nutshell. And it boils down to 3 variables, which all kind of combine to the same thing. The actress, duh. The animation, duh. But the third thing is the critical point. I find Starlight very relatable. They usually do the very human, very emotional, very applicable stories for Starlight. All of those nuanced interactions with others that aren't quite going the way they could, or you're not sure if they should go that way, or maybe I should be quiet about this, but maybe I shouldn't, and maybe I should talk about it. Yeah, it's very human, and human moments tend to be my favorite stuff in fiction in general. You remember the Pixar block? No, of course you haven't. It doesn't go live till next year. But I remember the Pixar block. And the moments that always stuck out for me in the Pixar films are the human ones. I'm going to quote myself here. It says something that my favorite scene in Monsters University is the one where a giant furry abomination thing is talking to a tiny egg-shaped green eyeball monster. And the two are just being very open and honest about how they feel, about the expectations of family and career, and how there's uncertainty about whether or not they can live up to what is being pushed upon them, and the pressure of going to college for the first time. And yeah, the lake scenes. For those of you who've seen Monsters University, I'm referring to the lake scene. That is such a wonderfully human moment. And they tend to give those moments to Starlight. And the actress nails it, and the animation nails it, so that's why Starlight is among my favorite characters. I just wanted to comment on that really quick, because that came up recently, and I swear it comes up semi-recently every time we talk about this show. Now, I'm totally with Sunburst. I actually am. The idea of finding someone to share enthusiasm with rocks. Again, we talked about that earlier, right? Like, shared enthusiasm is legit. And finding someone new you can really gush about something, especially something you haven't been able to gush about, that's an awesome sensation right there. Yeah, especially for the first time. I will never forget the first time I went to a Star Trek convention. Granted, I remember most things because I have an extremely good memory, but whatever. It's just a figure of speech. There was a unique emotional connection to that particular convention. Now, granted, you know me, I'm a super extrovert. So I was just running around like, hey, what's this? And what do you think of this? And blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget this. So they had a thing. They were selling, I can't remember what, the flip comm badges from TOS, right? They're selling replicas of that. And I remember rushing up, and there was a woman there. I could picture her in my head. She had kind of like light auburn hair, and she was dressed in an old TOS outfit, and she was debating them. And, yeah, there I am. 5. And I'm like, oh, what are you getting? And we started this whole conversation. I won't bore you with all the details, but we started this whole conversation about which comm she should get, or if she should get one at all, because she didn't really have the money to get more than one thing, right? More than one gimmick or prop or signed art, a photo. And we had this discussion, and 5-year-old me is like, well, let's look at it logically, because everything's math to me. A signed picture is neat, but are you going to put that in a thing? Are you going to put that up on your wall? Are you going to enjoy it every time you walk by it? What versus the comm badge? Like, what are you going to do with that? And she's like, well, I'll bring out the comm badge when I go and pose for photos, but the picture, the signed picture, I'll just throw up on the wall. I'll see that every day, and I'll enjoy that every day. So she ended up getting the picture instead. I think the vendor was upset with me for costing him a sale, but whatever. Because mathematically, she would gain more out of the picture, right? That's what I'm talking about. That moment is kind of awesome. And I do hope most of you have been able to experience that at least once. I've gotten that several times because I'm really lucky. I'm into everything, basically. You know, I remember the first time I found someone who I could gush about football with. Not American football, European football. That was like 2012. For perspective, that took a while. So that's pretty recent. Anyways. And just yelling about offsides. Moving on. Sorry, way off topic here. Point being, wonderfully relatable, right? Starlight is super relatable. And so she wigs out. She freaks out. She says she stays up all night. I believe her. What happens is an interesting little sequence of events. So she comes in and she says, I've thought about all the things we share in common. Which I just want to mention really quick. I used to be more into wrestling than I am. I've actually been kind of getting back into wrestling a little bit, Slim Jim Reborn. New World Order was pretty much my bag, along with... So there were two eras I was into wrestling. One is the New World Order era, and one is if you rewind quite a bit back to when Andre the Giant was regular. That's the two periods of time there. Anyways. So, the words. Monday Night Wars. I'm just saying, we could go off on that topic, but let's rein it in. So, $1 Million Man. The Undertaker's still going. Can you believe that? He's like, oh, sweet. Oh, but Twilight's asleep. Well, I'll just go back to bed then. Now, what happens here is surprisingly relatable and human. No negatives here. At first, you might think he's being a dick, but actually, this is extremely easy to understand. He's just tired. And so his thought is, oh, well, you know, if we can't do this with Twilight, we'll just wait until later or whatever. But then Starlight's like, no, I've got everything planned and I've got a day ready. And so he's like, oh, okay. And so he gets right back up. No fuss, no complaint. You know, there's no, which they could have easily done. They could have easily had him give like a little verbal kind of acknowledgement of how irritated he is. And they don't do that. Instead, he's just, oh, right, yeah, no, okay. Let's do it. So they both get up early. Good scene. Love the nuance of this episode. Can you let me get dressed? Raise eyebrow. So, this then leads to them going out. Yeah, exactly, Savacom. I agree with that trihexia. Undertaker was probably my second favorite back in the day. Andre was my favorite. That's why I pinpointed to him. So they go out to an apple farm, and you could see how much Starlight is reaching for some kind of connecting... let's not call it a connecting point, because I use that phrase to mean something different. She's reaching for something they have in common. That's the important part. There's got to be something we have in common. And Sunburst is like, eh. They stumble into Trixie. Trixie is awesome. Let's just get that out of the way. Trixie's awesome. And hysterical. This is when I point out the good showcase of continuity. Now, I already said it. I already explained it. You know, he tries to pull apart the chains. Starlight just it away. That is exactly right. That is exactly how that should be, and that moment would get a positive for proper showing and proper demonstration of the difference in magical talents and blah, blah, blah. This then leads to Sunburst and Trixie doing their montage, which is just the biggest smile moment of the entire episode, because they both suck at it so badly, and they're just both having so much fun, right? They're just like... Ooh, and anybody who knows anything about magic, that's another thing we could geek out about for a while, but the specifics of, you know, show magic, right? Trying to do that kind of stuff, knows that the people did their research, the writers did their research, the animators did their research to specifically write all of those tricks to be exactly as the wrong. Right? My personal favorite example, and I'll only give one, is there's this bit where they're doing the ball trick, and all of the cups are different styles and colors. Now, there's other points to that, but the whole point of the ball trick is you're not supposed to literally be able to see that, well, it's the polka dot cup, right? that just gives away the trick. And then there's the fact that she has the ball in all three, but doesn't have a method to actually procure. And they just screw it up on every level, and I love it. But I want to call attention to a specific moment. It's when Sunburst pulls out the cards and is like, "Is this your card?" And then the camera... Ross got there before me. The camera switches so you can see Trixie's face, and she's just smiling. Like, there's this wonderful smile as she's just, "No, that's not it. No, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it." And it never fades. Like, she never gets irritated or frustrated. She's just, "Nope. Nope. Nope." But yeah, she's completely engaged the whole time. I love it. God. So... wonderful montage, plus the story. Well, hopefully you can share it with us, Evo. Remember, you can feel free to chat with us. I know you're probably not into MLP, but when we start streaming again in a week from Tuesday, you know, we've got to find something you're into, right? So, okay. Actually, really quick, I want to say this out loud because Ross said this in chat, and I meant to say this out loud as well. It makes perfect sense that Sunburst would be into show magic because he can do that. Remember, he is not magically powerful. He's a magic geek, but he has no magical power or prowess. That's the whole point. That's why the chain thing earlier made perfect sense and was awesome. So, yeah, right? Like, him being into stage magic, yeah, that's legit. In fact, it makes sense that he would be into a lot of bookish topics. You notice all three topics he's into are things that are considered more book... I don't know what word to use. More book-knowledge-y kind of things, right? Geology, stage magic, or show magic, or whatever you want to actually call that, and of course, scholarly, that's a good word. Antiquing, and antiques in general. Right? Sunburst would probably not be into football, to use a direct example. That's a good comparison, Trihexis. Sunburst is a sage, whereas Starlight is the sorcerer, or the warlock. Yeah, exactly, Savacom. I mean, Starlight is super strong. It's one of her character traits. So, why would this be an issue? So, speaking of her being super strong and being the kind of person who just fireballs her way to victory, they go to the mirror. Now, I'm going to give a continuity counter just for the mirror in general. For the pool of, I forget what they called it. But I have to point out a little tidbit that she mentions. She had to unseal it. Now, I know they kind of showed that. Oh, we're up to 5, actually. They kind of showed that back in the episode where Pinkie Pie split herself. I forget the name of the episode. But yeah, she just kind of mentions, yeah, we probably shouldn't have broken the seal, but that's cool. It's magic. I wanted to show you it, right? Right? And I mean, if we duplicated ourselves, we could do all kinds of... Of course, someone like Starlight would be tempted by the pool. Of course she would. Thankfully, she doesn't give into that temptation. Yeah, that's a good way to put that, Imperial Star Destroyer. So, yeah, magic can fix this. Yeah, you look. By the way, that's a trend. That is 2 times she has tried to revert to what she knows to fix this. And I'm going to bring that up when it comes up a 3rd time as well. And then we hear this tapping, and there's Maud, who, as usual, is awesome. But also totally casual about being in a cave that directly connects to this horrible mirror pool that was so dangerous they had to seal it away. Because Maud... And of course, no, that makes perfect sense. Why would Maud be bothered by that? She's not going to use the pool. So it's no danger to her. And no one else goes through the cave, so who cares? Right? Also, Maud tells several jokes in this episode, but the one that I found most amusing is her literal first line of dialogue. Starlight's walking through the caves and says, "Oh gosh, I hope there's not another Pinkie in here." And Maud's response is, "Not exactly." Maud is, of course, super amazing. As usual, and again, credit to both the animators, writers, and voice actress, Maud demonstrates enthusiasm in a very Maud way. As we've talked about pretty much every time Maud has shown up, they keep nailing the fact that she is enthusiastic and she does care, she just demonstrates it differently than other people. It's really obvious that she's super into not only the geology, but sharing that enthusiasm about the geology with Sunburst. She just demonstrates it completely differently than Twilight did earlier, and, well, Trixie, for that matter. You'll notice, if you're paying attention, that Trixie, Twilight, and Maud all share enthusiasm with Sunburst in different ways. I don't know if that's even intentional or if that's just good writing, because obviously different characters should act in different way. But it's a nice message in its own right, isn't it? That we all can share enthusiasm in different ways, even with the same person. Maud would be an awesome Vulcan, I agree. And yeah, I agree. Triaxia. Of course, anybody who's going to clone themselves is a danger to the pool, because if they're going to clone themselves, then their clones are going to clone themselves. So anybody who would use it is a danger, right? There's a weird logic to that. But anyways. So, Maud is like, oh my god, starts finishing her sentences. All sorts of cool stuff there. See, I don't think Discord would go into the pool. I think Discord would just look at that and be like, oh, another me? That's insanity. And then a second Discord would pop up and be like, I agree. And then the third one would be like, there's simply too much of us. And then they would do this mock battle. Thank you, as always, Dawn. Much appreciate, and looking forward to more Gravity shenanigans tonight. Because that mode is super awesome. And that's going towards Skyward. Done. So, this leads me to losing my place. Where the hell was I in my notes? There's Maud. So the episode makes its point by using characters that are specifically the actual friends of Starlight. Now, duh. But at the same time, I do have to credit this for being a good decision narratively. Because remember, despite what previous episodes might indicate, Starlight is only really friends with a few people, right? Like, we talked about that several times before. She's really friends with Twilight. She's really friends with Trixie. She's really friends with Maud. She also gets along weirdly well with Spike, but unfortunately Spike isn't in this episode, so that's just whatever. Listen, clones... Killing your own clone isn't murder, Triaxia. It's cool, it's cool. I bring that up because these three characters... Obviously, they could have done more. These three characters are a good pick for this type of thing. Actual friends who get along better with other people, so why are we friends? This then leads to a wonderful scene where Twilight tries to help Starlight out, because she cares, because she wants to help, by missing the point. What Twilight... Damn it, Slim Jim. What Twilight does is a very common thing that most people do, including me, is we look at the surface and not the actual issue. She sees the surface issue, which is, well, you don't have a lot in common with your friend. So we need to find something that is in common. We need to find something that you have in common with him. And she addresses that point instead of the actual point. Once again, in a better design manner, we see how there's two actual connecting points, but one of them should be addressed and one of them is being addressed. Side note, I completely agree with Trathan. The moment where Starlight just walks up and nobody even walks off and nobody notices, I've actually been there. And it hurt more than it should have. Anyways. So yeah, Twilight misses the point entirely, and so Starlight says, I've got it. So she makes a very complex illusory spell to make their childhood home and make them as foals so they can play games again, because after all, this makes perfect sense. This is completely in character for Starlight. She is falling back on what she knows, which is what she does whenever she's out of her league. And what does she know? Well, obviously, magic is the big one. As usual, she always falls back on her magic and bulldozing her way through things because fireball, fireball, fireball. The second thing in this case is obvious. Well, the one thing I remember really loving doing with him was playing this board game as a child. Yep. Now, Sunburst kind of wigs out a little bit here. This is the final flaw I mentioned earlier. The final thing that's just kind of... Especially since Sunburst is perfectly in character in basically his very next scene, which I'll address in just a moment. Instead, he just yells and actually shouts and knocks the thing over. And yeah, it's just... It makes a degree of sense, and again, this is only one hoop, so I'm willing to let it go, but it is the final flaw of the episode. So, she rushes off. Everything's bad forever. And then Sunburst is, well, the camera actually shifts to Sunburst for a while and follows him for the next several minutes as he goes back through the friends, trying to figure out what he has in common with Starlight. Because, sure, I get along with her friends, but Starlight and I have tons in common. And you notice he is once again failing to miss the point. He is looking at the surface issue, not the core issue. So he reaches out to their friends. Naturally, he reaches out to Trixie, and naturally, there's nothing really in common there. And then he reaches out to Maud. Actually, he reaches out to Twilight first, but then to Trixie. Then to Maud. Maud, in addition to being generally awesome, says probably the best actual thing she could. Because, and I'm curious how many of you even caught this. Maud says, Starlight and I don't have that much in common. We just enjoy each other's company. Finally actually nailing the core point, which I've been building up to this entire Streamination. So Sunburst freaks out. We have nothing in common, so maybe we've grown apart, and maybe we aren't actually friends. And it's funny, because this works for several reasons. First of all, this is probably I'd say the second thing that Sunburst actually has in common with Starlight, is freaking out over their friendship. Well, of course she does. That was a joke, though. Yeah, he spiral worries out, which, yep, nope, that makes sense. But what I love about this is it kind of shows... It's a way of speaking with another character's voice. This is a narrative concept that actually isn't done all that often. I'm not sure why. It's a really good narrative trope if used properly. You have character A, and they're thinking or feeling something, but you don't want them to just say that. So what you do is you have them demonstrate it, and then you have another character who is either related or unrelated, and this other character... I was just repeating it, Mordoro, I'm sorry. I was just quoting her. The other character then says what the first character is actually thinking or feeling, and thus what we're getting is the message here through another character. This is why it's called, speaking through another character's voice, right? And that's exactly what Sunburst does. He says everything Starlight has been thinking on the off chance you've been missing it. Maybe we're not friends at all. Maybe we've grown apart, yada yada. If you've been paying attention, Starlight doesn't actually say any of that stuff. Sunburst does. Starlight demonstrates it, which is yet another example this show does wonderfully well of showing, then telling. So, then they have the big board game thing, which actually sounds kind of cool, if I'm being honest. Unicorns are just drama queens, you know? It was true even in the past. First of all, I'm sorry, Maud, prepare yourself. I can't even say it without laughing. That was just awesome, as usual. It takes about 1 minute until the end of the episode. I actually checked before they finally do what I just mentioned. They say the theme of the episode, which is friendship is not just stats. Now, I'm a very quantify kind of a person, because that's the nature of who and how I am, and I firmly believe that the overwhelming majority of reality can be quantified, you just have to do it right. Friendship is not stats. Just because you have these connecting points, these common bonds between this person, does not mean you are better friends with them than you are with someone else. Just because you have X, Y, and Z at rating 35.2 does not mean that you are a better friend with that person than this person, and so on and so forth. And yeah, hence the title of the episode, The Uncommon Bond. And that is an extremely important lesson that a surprising number of people I have encountered in my life have never learned. I was driving up to my sister's the other day, and I tend to get bored on that trip because it's an hour trip one way. So, that's... And I decided to do a pluses and a minuses for several of my close friends, just out of curiosity. And my sister and I had a long discussion about that. Now, again, if you quantify it properly, that can totally work. But even if there was someone who I had a bunch of pluses with, if I had so many connecting points and there's so many things I have in common, but it was only a surface level connection, it was only a surface level acquaintance, I would still be more friends with this other person over here who I have less connecting points with, right? And I'm not even joking. This is funny, the timing of this. This was 2 weeks ago now. 2 weeks as of tomorrow. And we had this whole discussion about how friendship is not, something that you can just point score in such a surface level observation. Now, you could actually quantify that, because all you'd have to do is give pluses for things like deeper meaning or enjoying their potential or whatever, right? Like, there's ways to actually do that, but that's off topic, and I don't want to get into that. But to share one little anecdote about that, there is one person in the world that I am comfortable with enough, I'm not sure how to phrase that I am sufficiently comfortable around to not have to talk. I think I've mentioned this concept before. How many of you have that problem where if you're interacting with someone else, if you're hanging out with someone else, and there's no dialogue, it just kind of gets awkward and weird, and so there has to be conversation or something happening? No, it's not my mother, it's my sister. My sister is the only person on the world that I can actually be around and just hang out with and not have to chat with her and be comfortable with that. That silence bugs the snot out of me in other cases. I can actually demonstrate this through action, ignoring the fact that I try to avoid dead air in my streams. There's also the roleplays. Anybody who's ever seen my Oblivion roleplay or my Fallout 3 roleplay knows that I tried to make sure that there was not long chunks of time where I don't say anything. Even though, with the advantage of hindsight and analysis, I could have absolutely just gone several long sections of gameplay with no dialogue, but I felt awkward doing that. Not because I'm awkward myself when I'm silent, but because I was technically performing, right? And I knew that there was an audience there, and being silent for a long period of time in front of the audience made me uncomfortable, right? Just wanted to share that personal anecdote, because the message of the show is actually kind of awesome, in my opinion. Knowing that there's plenty of good reasons to be friends, and there's nothing wrong with being friends for different reasons, and there's nothing wrong with both sharing enthusiasm and not having shared enthusiasm, absolutely nails that theme and showcases it constantly, and then talks about it in the last minute. And then there's this weird book. I'm not sure what's up with that book. I'm sure it's not really important. See you around, Lord Harrimont. Lord Harrimont votes for purple, which we're about to do right now. We got to do the colors. So what do you think? What color should this be? I've probably given across my opinion by virtue of the fact that I can only come up with 3 flaws for the entire episode, and 2 of them were basically nitpicks. Let's simplify this. Does anyone not want to vote purple? Also, I agree, Evo. When you have nothing to talk about, I can't be the only person who preps conversation points and things to discuss. Like, I have a freaking list in my head. This is not a joke. For the next time I interact with Pax, Gary, and Dawn, because we're going to be playing Dying Light tonight. And I want to make sure I have topics, just in case there's any dead space. So I want to make sure I have stuff to talk about. I can't be the only one who preps topics before I go interact with someone. That would have been cool, Traven. I agree. Breaking the red streak. I mean, he's had a purple. In fact, I think he's had 2 purples. Double check. Where are you at, Haber? There you are. He has had 2 purples. 1 in Season 5 and 1 in Season 6. And funnily enough, let's look at this list. Josh Haber has written The Cutie Remark, The Gift of Maud Pie, The Fault in Our Cutie Marks and To Where and Back Again. I think I'm getting one of those wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, those are Maud and Starlight-centric episodes, and he's... I'm just saying, he might be our best writer for both Maud and Starlight. Just something that's occurring to me here. Yeah, he nails Starlight. In fact, I noticed that several of my favorite Starlight episodes, which, as I just referenced, is why I like her so much as a character, were by this gentleman. Anyways, Purple. I'm not going to build it up. This is not just a very good episode, which it is a very good episode, but it's also extremely human, extremely relatable. It has that extra oomph of the emotional impact, the vibe. Like Trathan said earlier, Starlight just walking away, nobody even noticing. The connection and the status of their friendship and the uncommon bond and the enjoying people's time. And it has Trixie, and it has Maud, and it has... Like, this is a heavy continuity, great episode with wonderful performances and very relatability, and it's extremely well crafted. I can only give up 3 flaws for it. And if we want to go ahead and add another little thing here, it has forwards continuity, sometimes better referred to as foreshadowing. This episode literally foreshadows the next episode. How often does that happen in this show? It's not common. Despite how continuity-heavy this show is, it's very rare they lay down bricks like that. So yeah, Purple. Which, I want to check something here. 1... Still 1, 2... 3, 4... 5... I think 5 is it. Double checking. Yep. That means 5 purples this season. That's impressive. I think that technically makes this the second best season based on that metric. I don't know, I haven't tabulated all of them. I know season 5 so far has been our most purple-heavy season. Oh yeah, and Kevin Lepin, thank you. I was actually just looking for him. Yeah, for a season 7 to have this much good in it is unusual regardless of the show. A perfect example of this, if I might be so bold, is TNG and Deep Space Nine. Now, when you think of DS9 Season 7, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, the finale. Think about the first half of Season 7 of Deep Space Nine. And the less said about TNG Season 7, the better. Memes aside, you can see how a show just kind of starts to drift in quality, because it's been going on for a long time. That's very normal. There are ways to combat that, and not every show does that. Now, Genesis was the greatest episode ever. It was almost as good as Q and the Grey. Not quite, though. But yes, as S.A. Ross asked, next week, 2 weeks off, is Shadowplay. And that will be the end of my knowledge of MLP, because I've covered the movie, and I've watched Shadowplay Part 1 and 2 more than once, actually. And that's it. That's as far as I've gotten. So in 2 weeks, we will be in blind territory for me, which is actually a little bit exciting, if I'm being honest. But next week we cover Shadowplay, and we get to see the Pony of Shadows. But for now,